Good evening, everybody. My name is Dakota Eldridge, and I am presenting today on contemporary issues in aviation law with a focus on unmanned aerial systems and drones. I selected this topic because of being such a new part of the aviation industry, an extremely rapidly growing sector that over the course of Aviation 605, we've kind of gotten to see some of the changes that have come out of it. As an Army pilot, the aviation industry has a significant impact, and the drone use on the modern battlefield is changing a lot of how the U.S. Army and other branches of military service operate. So I'm extremely intrigued by the topic and interested to see the aviation legal changes that are going on. For our agenda, we'll be going through, again, a brief introduction, going over what we're going to talk about. Once we finish that, we'll go over a contemporary issues overview. I've got a short video I'll show just showing the top three items. We'll address a different one in this presentation, but very similar in context. We'll go a deep dive into each of the three sections that I've decided for this presentation and take a look at some of the biggest considerations with respect to law and some additional considerations when it comes down to like modern cases that have been presented or argued for reference. We'll finish that up with a biblical integration, focusing on covenants and the law in the Bible, and then we'll bring it all back together in a summary. So contemporary issues in drone law, I broke it down into three different categories here. We got our first category is going to be regulatory and compliance, with a significant influence by the FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration. Secondly, we'll get into personal injury and property damage law, specifically taking a good look at strict liability and the difference between that and negligence. And then privacy and surveillance, probably the most well-known contemporary issue in drone law that will definitely make some big impact across the different states. So I got a short video we're going to take a look at here, and then we'll continue.
Are you a drone operator? Here are the top 3 legal issues you need to know to keep your business flying high and above the law. First, FAA regulations and compliance. You must follow FAA rules on registration, airspace restrictions, and operational guidelines. Get familiar with the rules to avoid fines and penalties. Second, privacy and surveillance concerns. Be mindful of privacy laws. Don't invade someone's personal space with your drone. Respect privacy rights to avoid legal trouble. And third, liability and insurance. If your drone causes damage or injury, you could be held liable. Protect yourself with the right insurance coverage. Stay compliant and safe. Need help navigating drone laws? Contact us today. Are you a drone operator? Here are the top 3 legal issues you need.
Okay, getting into our first topic, we're going over regulatory and compliance. Again, for regulatory and compliance, the biggest consideration here is the Federal Aviation Administration. It's a nationally designated agency for inside the United States that governs pretty much anything that regarding to aviation law, administrative law, and anything to manage the national airspace system. So the Federal Aviation Administration is the primary agency that facilitates establishing new regulations. Specifically speaking for drones, we have the CFR Part 107. Several of the different parts cover underneath the 14th Code of Federal Regulations. You get into the several areas of aviation law or regulatory requirements. Part 107 is specific for drones. Two of the biggest things that I want to talk about with regards to Part 107 is certification and registration standards. Part 107 states that Anybody that's operating a drone commercially has to have a certificate in order to operate in that official capacity and receive compensation. Very similar to a commercial or a regular commercial aviation certificate holder for an airplane or a helicopter pilot. Similarly, registration standards currently under Part 107 require that any drone greater than basically a half a pound or 0.55 pounds is required to be registered for use. Now, if a drone happens to weigh under that, but is being used for commercial use, it still has to be registered. So again, a big aspect of that is any type of commercial use by the individual operator and the drone itself. There has to be, you have to be documented with the FAA. If you do not, you can receive the same penalties and fines in accordance with the regulations governing this body, and that's usually adjudicated by the FAA through the court system. Something that makes this an issue is the waivers as well as the enforceability of this section of the law. So underneath, if you take a look at the Federal Aviation Administration's website, there's a couple of different avenues. One in particular is governs the recreational use of drones. Can be confusing. When I first started looking at this, it was a little difficult to determine what constitutes or what qualifies for a waiver and what doesn't. Again, being an issue because drone technology is changing so much with different types, makes, models, different features, different things that go on to the drones. Again, it can be pretty confusing when you're looking at what constitutes a waiver and then what is able to not, or what doesn't qualify for a waiver, and you can be in violation of just going out. So again, you can go to Walmart and find drones on shelves. You can go to, again, bigger agencies. You can order them online. Some drones, we've seen even as big as, scale of 1 to 50 Mach Boeing 777s, things like that for recreational as well as commercial use within the airspace. So again, an area that is difficult and needs some clarification, especially going through. And then for enforcement, again, it's one of those things that because the law is changing so fast, enforceability of all of these standards with all the changes, again, can get difficult, right? And a regulation that isn't enforceable really doesn't hold as much weight as it should in terms of keeping the national airspace system safe and efficient when incorporating drone use or unmanned aerial systems into the greater airspace picture. Again, getting into compliance because it is different. Jurisdiction between states, federal, and local governments change. There's multiple cases out there that are present that you can see where one state rules in a specific way, or the certain law enforcement approaches it differently across the nation. So again, it's kind of interesting when we're getting into this in terms of giving that power to the Federal Aviation Administration that it has for that administrative law portion. So definitely a good contemporary issue to start off with. Our second contemporary issue is going to be personal injury and property damage. So the two biggest things that come to mind with personal injury and property damage come with the terms of liability and negligence. Throughout this course, we've seen that strict liability requires extreme dangerous activity determination, especially whenever utilizing certain sections of the tort law in order to impose civil penalty and hold individuals accountable for either injury or losses or damage due to aviation accidents. Again, drone use is not addressed in many of the laws, but I would assume as and some of the research also supports that just like airplanes have advanced in technology, they're not to the point of being extremely dangerous operations anymore, like it was in the early 1900s, whenever the first airplanes first left the ground. So those machines have developed extremely in a direction that makes them safer to use. Some of the things that confound that is the new technology issues. You have connectivity issues. Again, one of the regulatory requirements is that you have to maintain visual with the drone while in operation. Again, that's not really going to help too much if you happen to lose connectivity between the controller and whatever device is being used to control that drone, and it's during its flight. As an Army pilot, I've have anecdotal evidence where others have used a Raven, which is a smaller unmanned aerial system that the Army employs or used to employ, losing connectivity. And if certain procedures weren't followed correctly, that aircraft would continue flying in a direction until it either run out of battery or happened to get so far away from the original point without receiving any type of input, and then would finally just put itself on the ground. Again, indiscriminate of where it's at, doesn't really know, and isn't able to differentiate what may be a hazard or how it may be a hazard to something on the ground. So interesting there. A majority of aviation accidents fall into negligence, and the governing law typically that goes with a lot of these cases talks about res ipsa loquitur. In terms of determining negligence, it has to be covered from a sense that the event could not have happened due to anything other than negligence. The individual that received the damages or injury didn't contribute in any way, and the individual itself is responsible for the operation of that aircraft. So when it comes down to negligence, again, a lot of the legislation and rulings reverts typically back to negligence. Case in point is Alina Pittock was at a USC fraternity party at 11 o'clock at night, according to the report. Had a drone operated by one of the other individuals at the fraternity event. Ended up flying a drone and hitting Miss Pittock in the head, and she suffered some injuries that lasted pretty long term. For her litigation, she brought it forward and actually won via a settlement per se for the injury that she received during that one. And biggest contributing factor there was the negligence on the operator by operating at night, which is also a regulatory requirement. So that's it for personal injury and property damage. The last and certainly not least contemporary topic is going to be privacy and surveillance. Privacy and surveillance is probably by far, again, the most discussed and the most argued section regarding modern drone use, especially with electro-optical sensors such as cameras, photographing devices. Through my research, identified even items that get into RFID tracking and ability to intake or process data in many ways that we honestly probably don't even understand at this moment. But it bears the question, what is the limitation of privacy? Throughout the module, we saw an individual ended up getting arrested because he was protecting himself and his property by shooting down a drone. Again, there's a wide variety of cases that have come through this specific contemporary issue that's caused a lot of issues, even up to including the Bill of Rights. So when we're looking at the Fourth Amendment, we're looking at the amendment that covers unreasonable searches and seizures. In the case of Long Lake Township versus Maxon, the Michigan Supreme Court covered a case that the township, in order to enforce one of their nuanced local ordinances, due to the expanding property and junkyard from the Maxon family, they utilized a drone to map and conduct an aerial surveillance of the area in order to demonstrate the changes that have been made and how the Maxon family was not in compliance with the township's ordinance. It made it all the way through the district court, all the way up to the Supreme Court in Michigan, in which the Michigan ruled in favor of the township, establishing a pretty decent precedence with stating that that particular enforcement from this sense does not violate the Fourth Amendment right of the individuals, and was acceptable given the situation. So again, we see a couple of different adjudications based on the state or local level, and not as much preemptive nature that the FAA typically should have, or I believe should have in this case, for helping with the contemporary issue of privacy and surveillance. Now we're going to get into our biblical integration. In the Bible, we have the Old Covenant and a New Covenant. The Old Covenant under Moses is pretty much what governs the Old Testament living. It goes over the law that God established through Moses with his people in order to keep and unify not only the people amongst themselves, but also unify God's people to himself. Again, a law that the Israelites broke time and over again, but also really pertained to, honestly, just to the Israelites. Again, it wasn't shared nearly as widespread as indicated there, which is again another big difference between the Old and the New Covenant. The New Covenant is in Christ. So by Christ coming, shedding his blood and dying on the cross, he established the new and eternal covenant through that act. So Hebrews 9:15 states, "For this reason, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, because a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions under the first covenant." That's straight out of the Great Adventure Catholic Bible. The debt of sin is paid. That act alone by Christ is what signed, sealed, and delivered the new covenant to us as Christians, and is exactly what every one of us can rest assured and are hope for in the future. So in summary, drones and unmanned aerial system utilization is rapidly growing. It's going to continue to change. The contemporary legal issues that we see based on compliance, liability, and privacy are really going to come back to the FAA establishing governing or administrative law that I feel will preemptive or utilize preemption in order to standardize things at the state level as time goes on. As professionals in the industry, if we live by the golden rule, treat others as we want to be treated, again, we can mitigate some of the violations that we have in every single one of these. thank you. I appreciate everyone's time and hope everyone took something away from this presentation.